Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce RTX 4060 Ti 8GB model in Cyberpunk 2077. This one is the Founders Edition version of the card. We are running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech PowerUp's GPU-Z. Well, Tech PowerUp is actually taking a really long time to patch the 4060 Ti in. It still says unknown right there. But most of the things are here. Resizable bar is still enabled as well. And over on the left, we're pairing it with the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D and 32GB of RAM, 3600MHz CL14 in dual channel. Let's get into it, shall we? First up, let's go over the settings. I'm playing at 1080p resolution first, using the high settings preset with high texture. And I am going to disable the FSR first over here because the preset sets it to quality there, as well as the motion blur. Everything else is left at the high settings preset. Over in the gameplay tab, we're using crowd density on high, and let's get to it. Alright, here we are. Ooh, this is actually really smooth right here at 1080p high settings. The game looks very good using these settings as well, guys, and it gets around 100 frames per second. That's actually a little bit better than what I was expecting here. I don't know why. VRAM is obviously not a limitation here at 1080p resolution, even on ultra settings. I think even with ray tracing and frame generation enabled, it didn't really stutter whatsoever. That's one setting that I tested on the Sunday video, well, not Sunday video, but full review video of the 4060 Ti. GPU usage is fluctuating a little bit right there in this area because this is slightly CPU bound right here. But not a problem. The 5800X 3D is still capable of achieving the most out of the 4060 Ti, like 99% of the time. Now, where? God damn it! We lost Bob! He's not here again! Are you serious? So high settings at 1080p is definitely not a problem for this GPU, but what about 1440p high? Here we go, 2560 by 1440 is now the resolution. We're using the same settings exactly, and it's getting 60s. That means that it will probably drop from 60 FPS here and there. This part is actually pretty intensive here, 60 flat, okay, that's not too bad, 59. Alright, nothing that a little bit of an overclock would offset. It wouldn't offset. Yeah, it's still pretty solid experience here at 1440p high settings, I would say. And the VRAM is still enough at this resolution in settings as well, so no worries there. Ray tracing is another story. It's probably gonna run out of VRAM when we enable ray tracing at 1440p. But for now, it looks really good. You can get that native 1440p experience with this card at high settings, which is great. The problem is, like, it performs well for a 2020 $400 GPU, like the 3060 Ti, you know. For a 2023 $400 GPU, I was expecting better, guys. Not gonna lie, alright? It's not impressive whatsoever for a 2023 mid-range GPU. It has fewer CUDA cores than the 3060 Ti. It has the same amount of VRAM, it has less bandwidth, it has PCI Express 4.0 times 8. It's just too cut down. It kind of feels like it should have been a 4050 Ti or a 4060 instead of the 4060 Ti. Anyway, it gets okay FPS, you know, it drops sometimes from 60, not a problem. It's nothing that like DLSS wouldn't solve, you know, so if you set it to quality right here at 1440p, it still looks really, really good. And it gets you those 90s, 80s that we saw at 1080p as well. It's actually really, really similar to the FPS that we saw at 1080p with the high settings and native res. Alright, I really don't want to wreck the car's lights. I love having them on, you know, and I usually just kill the lights completely because of freaking Bob, obviously, right? He's the root of all our problems here in this channel, obviously. Whenever a video doesn't get enough views, it's because of Bob. Of course, 100%. That's why we must kill him every single time. Anyway, dropping into the 80s. Oh, and there goes the light. Damn it. Even touching 100 FPS at times, VRAM usage is slightly lower than at native 1440p. and it still looks really good. Like, if you're not using ray tracing, I'd say it looks very similar to native resolution whenever you enable DLSS, maybe even better sometimes because it gets rid of some of the noise, visual noise that is present at a native resolution, at least at 1440p and 4K. So let's turn DLSS off, leave everything else the same, and bump it up to 2160p, which is 4K resolution. Oh boy. This game looks so good at 4K, dude. It's really gorgeous, even at high settings. Again, you do not need ray tracing to get a good visual fidelity out of this game. A really great one, actually. Now, it's getting around 30 FPS. This is definitely not meant for 4K gaming. You can see it right here. We're not using any fancy stuff like ray tracing overdrives and stuff like that, and it's already dropping from 30 frames per second into the high 20s. It's not terrible, but yeah, I wouldn't play like this, especially when you have the option to play at like 1440p 60 FPS or with DLSS quality at 1440p with like 90 FPS. That's way better, even on a 4K monitor, guys. Now the thing is, we do have that DLSS super resolution available to us, and at 4K it makes a much bigger difference than it did at the other resolutions. By the way, I didn't test DLSS at 1080p because there's just no point. It was already a flawless experience, right? Anyway, at 4K with quality DLSS, the game looks insanely good. I mean, again, it might even be better than the native resolution because it was a bit noisy at native res, and now it actually smooths out that noise effect. It's running okay right now. It's using 7 gigs of VRAM, so around the same as 1440p native, and it's getting 50 FPS. Now, is 50 FPS the best experience ever? No, obviously not. But is it playable? Yes. Does it stutter? No. So it's actually alright. I could see some people enjoying the game like this. Let's try balanced DLSS next. Now with balanced DLSS, we should be able to achieve 60 on average. And at 4K resolution, balanced DLSS still looks amazing, guys. You know, it doesn't look as good with ray tracing because of the reflections. It's really weird because DLSS is meant to be used with ray tracing, obviously. That's why they developed this technology, I guess. But it makes the internal resolution of the reflections super low, and it's just not good to look at. Like, at native resolution, there is a huge fidelity jump over DLSS when you're using ray tracing in this game. Now, these reflections still look pretty good. Look at that. Not super high res, but they're there. And it gets us 62 frames per second with like high 50s in worst case scenarios. And this is not like the worst case scenario in the entire game, but it's pretty close. And it's a really intensive area compared to like 90% of the game, I guess. Anyway, there is still another trick up our sleeves, DLSS frame generation. This should be pretty decent at 4K res, okay, with quality DLSS. Oh, it doesn't seem to... Oh! Okay, I was gonna say, it doesn't seem to improve our FPS by that much here, because at quality DLSS we were seeing like 50, and now we're seeing 57 around here. With frame generation on, which usually doubles our FPS, but take a look at that VRAM usage. That's why it's not increasing our FPS like crazy, alright? We're VRAM bound at this point. It's spilling into the RAM. It's at 12 gigabytes right now. This game usually uses a little bit less than that whenever you don't run out of VRAM. And that frame time might not be as smooth as it was before, although so far it's pretty decent though. And I mean, now you can actually feel a little bit more input lag, so in the first person aspect of this game it won't really be that great with frame generation. This is why this should have had way more VRAM, or at least like 12 gigs, because this is a selling point of the 40 series, right? Frame generation, and frame generation does use VRAM. Look at that. That's a little spike because of frame generation maxing out our VRAM again. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever for them to use 8 gigabytes of VRAM on a $400 GPU, mid-range GPU, that could be capable of playing games at 4K with frame generation absolutely fine, but it isn't because of lack of VRAM. Alright, so next up I just restarted the game so we can reset that VRAM spillage a little bit, you know, and we're back to 1080p resolution, and I'm gonna use, there's still the ultra settings preset. Should we use the ultra set? You know what, let's try it out for a little bit. I would definitely choose high over ultra though, but ultra is still possible, at least at 1080p, so let's try it. So ultra settings at 1080p native resolution does not max out that VRAM, of course. It's at around 6 gigabytes, which is alright, and it's getting 80 frames per second on average so far. That's also pretty good. I don't think it's gonna drop from 60 FPS, even in most intensive scenarios, so if you want that 60 plus FPS experience all of the time, Ultra might be a good choice with a 4060 Ti at 1080p resolution. Yeah, 6.5 gigabytes almost, sometimes around here. It gets good FPS even on ultra settings. Frame times might be slightly more inconsistent than they were at the high settings, but it's not really that noticeable, as I told you, so I think if you're playing at 1080p, go for ultra. Let's go ahead and do this, and we're now at 1440p using the same ultra settings preset. Well, it's actually not the preset, because the preset enables FSR by default. So yeah, this is native res at 1440p. It's looking fantastic, guys, with those reflections on Ultra being amazing. I am still very impressed with the fidelity that comes out of Ultra settings in this game, and even high, you know. But yeah, like the shadows, the dynamic shadows are just amazing. That's a really nice update that they did to the game. The reflections, the lights, it's really gorgeous. But yeah, it gets 40-something FPS here. It's not great, you know, it's still playable, but I would definitely choose high settings instead of ultra at this resolution. Let's do quality DLSS now. Start counting the FPS, go back to that area. I guess now it's performing around the same as the high settings and native 1440p. Again, it's good performance. That doesn't mean that the card is a good buy. Just keep that in mind, alright? The fact that I'm enjoying the experience and the graphics doesn't mean it's worth $400, because we had this kind of performance in the past with the 3070 and sometimes 3060 Ti, because sometimes this card actually matches the 3060 Ti, and in a very few specific scenarios, it's worse than the 3060 Ti, which is stupid and insane, and I don't think it ever happened in the past. Now, let's go up to 4K. Here we go, 2160p Ultra, native. Oh boy. Is it loading still? It might be loading. No? No, I don't think it's loading, actually. Yeah, it's... Oh my god, okay, it gets less than 20 FPS, guys. You definitely need some DLSS. I'm gonna set it to balanced since it looked pretty good at 4K. And now we're in the 40s. Getting slightly lower FPS, actually, than 1440p using ultra settings, native res. So it's still okay, you know, it's still gonna provide an alright experience here at 4K res. But I guess if we enable frame generation and set the DLSS to balanced, we might run out of VRAM finally and start stuttering like crazy, because now we're on ultra. Oh, I can see a lot of more shimmering and jagged edges than we saw previously at high settings with quality DLSS and frame generation enabled. So balanced DLSS will give you slightly lower visual fidelity, and it's noticeable even at 4K with the frame generation enabled. VRAM is going up, yeah, 7.8. I guess frame generation with this card in particular, at 4K at least, doesn't really do much. It's kind of weird, actually. Anyway, back to 1080p. Let's try the Ray Tracing Ultra preset, which sets DLSS to auto, but let's turn it off and see it at the native resolution first. These are the settings over here. It's not path tracing yet. We're also going to test that out in just a little bit, but that's too intensive, okay? And at native resolution, using Ray Tracing and 1080p, we can get around 40 to 50 frames per second. That's exactly what I saw previously. Seems like it's running out of VRAM still, isn't it? Like, it's starting to stutter a little bit more. Yes, okay, VRAM was maxed out there for a second. So it's spilling into the RAM once again. Maybe it just needs a restart, because it's already spilled a bit of the information that was stored in the VRAM into the RAM. So let's do that. Alright, back here. That RAM usage is lower now. It was at 12 gigs previously. And that VRAM usage is still going up there. Look at that, 7.8. Again, it's not 7.8 gigabytes, okay? That's just... Don't kill me, please. Somebody actually told me, why are we watching this guy's video? Damn, that's a lot of stuttering. Why are we watching this guy's videos? He doesn't even know that a gigabyte is 1024 megabytes and 8 gigabytes is 8192 megabytes. Like, come on, man. I'm here playing a game while I'm talking. I don't have time to do the proper conversion in my head, right? Anyway, this is okay-ish. It's kind of the same experience as like 1440p was at native resolution using ultra settings, I believe. Now, quality DLSS puts our VRAM back into the lower 7000 megabyte range, which is nice. We got a little stutter there at the beginning, by the way, but it was probably just applying DLSS. And now we're back up into the 70s. It dropped into the 50s, by the way, back there in the roundabout. I didn't really check, but we gotta go back there then. Let's go through this area. Nope, come on. What? It's not funny? I'm sorry if it's not funny, okay? I get it. You are a person in a virtual world. Oh, this looks really weird, actually, with DLSS and Ray Tracing. See, those reflections are a lot more... It's not pixelated, blurry. Yes, that's it. They're a lot blurrier when you're using DLSS and Ray Tracing at the same time in this game. It's kind of weird, again. Over here, yeah, it doesn't even drop from 60, so you can play with Ray Tracing as long as you use DLSS and make the game look blurry. Great. Okay, I'm gonna keep the quality DLSS now when using Ray Tracing, okay? At 1440p. Okay, I'm gonna keep the quality DLSS now, and I have set it to 1440p resolution this time around. And now that the first stutter is gone, I'm gonna start counting our FPS. Take a look at that VRAM once again. It's close to maxed out, and that's terrible, obviously, for a brand new GPU. It should have headroom for future games, but it doesn't. That's another big issue about this GPU. You can play a lot of games, even at 1440p, like high settings. But a year down the line, or 2 years down the line, you won't be able to. You gotta lower those textures to like medium or even low for games to be playable without stuttering, and then they will look terrible, even though it's a high resolution. That's, yeah, it's not a future-proof GPU whatsoever, and even for its generation, it's quite lacking in the VRAM department. That's why the 16 gigabyte should have been the only card coming out from the 4060 Ti series, or 12 gigabytes, so we don't have more VRAM on a freaking 4060 Ti than we have on a 4070, you know? Whatever. It's weird. I know it's because of the buzz width and stuff like that. They would need to redesign the GPU to give it 12 gigs instead of 16 or 8, but I mean, why not do that in the first place? You gotta count with that. It's playable like this. It's not great still, but okay, it's not terrible either. Once again, if you set it to balance, the reflections will be terrible. Once again, very, very low quality. It's still applying, that's why the stutter happened. So I wouldn't really play like this, honestly. I prefer to play at 1440p Ultra with balanced DLSS than 1440p Ultra Ray Tracing with balanced DLSS, because it just looked better. It just, DLSS wrecked the ray traced reflections. Let's do 4K next with, let's enable frame generation as well. And balanced over here. And here we are. This is it. Ultra RT settings. And it's gonna take a while to apply, I guess. Oh my. Or, no! Wait. Oh, we finally killed it, my friends. Oh, yes. No, it was applying. Never mind. Oh. No. We actually finally killed it. Look at this. Oh, look at that stuttering. It's heavily running out of VRAM at this point because of ray tracing plus frame generation plus 4K resolution. It just gets wrecked. It can't do it with 8 gigabytes. That RAM usage is up there once again, like 15 gigabytes right now. And even at 4K with balanced DLSS, it is looking rough, actually, and frame generation at the same time with ray tracing enabled. It's see, like the little reflections on the ground. It's kind of weird looking. Anyway, this is unplayable. It stutters way too much. You cannot do this. If you disable frame generation, though, the VRAM should go down by a lot. Oh boy. Oh yes, but if you disable frame generation, it can't get good FPS or playable ones. What about like performance? DLSS. Ultra performance is terrible, by the way. 30 FPS. With some drops still into the 20s. And now it looks very rough once again because of the low quality reflections. See, don't use high resolutions with ray tracing. It's definitely not worth it. Lastly, I just restarted the game, so the VRAM spillage is fixed, okay? And we're gonna do Ray Tracing Overdrive settings, alright? Without DLSS here, and without motion blur once again. So these settings actually broke my RTX 3060 Ti. It started artifacting like crazy and crashing and giving me just a black screen on my PC. It was terrible. So I'm really scared to try it out here on a 4060 Ti as well, because some people told me that they had the same crashing artifacting issues with a 4090, I think they told me, or a 4080, something like that, 4080 or a 4090. And they actually had to RMA the card. Now Nvidia gives me the cards, so I'm not sure if they can RMA it. Like, I don't know how it works if you break a GPU sent by them. But this is it. This is native 1080p resolution using path tracing, ray tracing, or ray tracing overdrive. It looks insane, actually. Kind of looks weird at times at this low resolution of 1080p, because since the game is fully path traced at this point, the fidelity or the definition of the image isn't as high as like native 1080p was previously, if I can make myself understandable. I don't think it looks like native 1080p anymore. If you enable DLSS, however, it's gonna be much better, I think. Oh yes. Oh yes, in terms of visuals, it actually looks better than native res right now. And in terms of performance, it's getting the same or slightly lower performance than what we saw at 1080p Ultra Ray Tracing native. So if you like RT or path tracing, what the hell, that guy was running and then he was just crouched there, probably pooping or something, I don't know. Anyway, it's not great here. Look at that. Fluctuates too much here, lower 30s and higher 20s actually, with stuttering issues still. And it's not like we are running out of VRAM, are we? Like, it spilled a little bit into the RAM already, but VRAM is under control at 7 gigs, or 7,000 megabytes, I'm sorry. Yeah, it could be playable right now. Especially if you lock the FPS and slightly overclock the card so it doesn't dip into the 20s, but I mean, what are you doing at this point? It looks worse, in my opinion. That's been it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one very soon. As always, love you all. Bye-bye.